So, I saw a video in my recommended the other day that looked kind of weird, and so I thought, why not? I'll watch it. Little did I know what I was about to be thrown into. It was this video. The Toxic World of Tess Holliday and Fat Activism. Politics, Lies, and Health. Which, by the way, is actually the first result if you just search Tess Holliday's name on YouTube. At time of recording, it has 2.4 million views. This YouTuber, Kiana Docherty, makes videos sharing what I've learned about health, behavior change, obesity, and weight loss, doing lots of research and making interesting videos to help us on our journey to health and personal improvement, to quote her channel's About section. This video that was recommended to me is an hour of fat shaming and blaming the obesity epidemic on Tess Holliday, who is apparently a famous model. I'm kind of a recluse, so I've never heard of her, but I actually have seen her book at work. Apparently, according to Kiana, Tess is glamorizing obesity to the point that she is going to single-handedly cause a national health crisis. And recently, after Tess Holliday has made public her diagnosis with disordered eating, Kiana made a video saying that Tess Holliday couldn't be anorexic because she's fat.
Cool.
I thought to myself, this can't possibly be that popular. This woman cannot possibly be making videos just shaming fat people, right? Right? In this video, I will be using the word fat to describe people at times. Fat is not an insult, nor is it a moral judgment. It is just a word. While we have been taught that fat is one of the worst things you can call someone, it's a neutral word. Some people have more fat than others. Some people self-identify as fat. Other people use different euphemisms. I am using fat in this video because that is what a number of people have told me they prefer, and I want to be respectful. There is no wrong way to have a body, but fat people have been shamed by the medical industry, society, and the beauty industry for just existing. So I will be using the word fat in this video. It is just a word. I will also do my best not to psychoanalyze or diagnose anyone in this video. I'll just leave that to Kiana. You really cannot know anybody's health status, mental or physical, just by watching videos of them, especially as a layperson. It is both harmful and dangerous to make health claims about people, especially when you are not a medical professional. Kiana started making videos in 2020, and her first few videos were educational content about binge eating and weight loss. These did okay. Kiana's channel only really started taking off when she made a video about a fat YouTuber, Amberlynn Reed. And it's clear that this success impacted how her channel grew from there, because her most viewed videos are all about famous fat people. And for the most part, they are offensive and incredibly unpleasant to watch. These videos are fatphobic cringe content, and they're really indicative of how, as a society, we view fat people as a spectacle and a disgusting one. At first, Kiana does start out a little more balanced, a little more sympathetic. Not nice by any means, but she's not outright insulting anybody. She does blame Amberlynn for being fat, and the videos are still really awful, but it's gonna get a lot worse. The next set of videos is about Amy and Tammy. They are sisters who are both overweight and trying to qualify for weight loss surgery on TV. Kiana's videos explain why Amy was successful in losing the weight and Tammy failed, but they are biased. Kiana said that Amy had really good motivation and a can-do attitude, but comparing the sisters is pretty apples and oranges.
And you might think that you're arguing apples to apples, but a lot of time you're arguing apples to oranges. You're having a completely different conversation.
Comparing the two isn't right or even logical. Amy is fat, but not nearly as fat as her sister. Tammy experiences chronic pain due to her weight, and she doesn't leave the house. Amy does have negative health outcomes because of her weight, but she has a fiance and wants to have a baby. From what we're able to see, she has a pretty good life. Tammy, from the information we have, seems pretty miserable. Kiana blames Tammy for having no motivation and a shitty attitude, but you really can't compare the two sisters. Kiana also points out an emotional reaction that Tammy has to being unable to walk a certain distance with her sister, and says that it's an overblown emotional reaction, but is it? She can't even successfully take a walk. Her condition is that debilitating. I think I would cry too, and this is just mean. Kiana still occasionally does make videos that are just about weight loss or other health topics, but the majority of her content now is just fatphobic cringe content.
Look at this fat person. Isn't their behavior just so embarrassing? Aren't you glad that's not
You.
When Kiana started to see success with her videos dunking on famous fat people, she just went with it. Of her top 10 most popular videos, 9 of them are about fat YouTubers or celebrities. While a lot of these videos do include health claims and psychoanalysis of people she's talking about, by far the meanest, in my opinion, is the one that I first saw, the one about Tess Holliday. Kiana has one problem with all this. She says that it's fine for Tess to be on the cover of a magazine, it's fine for her to be fat on the cover, as long as they don't claim that she's healthy. Kiana has a lot of nerve with the assumptions she's making here. She insists point blank that there's no way that Tess lives a healthy life or has an active lifestyle. Kiana says that Tess is claiming that being morbidly obese is healthy. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that term, but really that's just not what she's doing. All Tess is trying to do, as any rational human being could see, is try to normalize fat people being considered beautiful and not diseased. And for people to stop telling her about her own health, as if it's any of their business. Now, I don't really know anything about Tess Holliday, aside from the information that Kiana provides in her video. But it's pretty easy to see, if you don't hate fat people, that she's not doing anything wrong.
The inconvenient truth in this instance is that at 5'3" and over 300 pounds, Tess Holliday has a BMI of at least 49 and would be considered to have the most extreme form of obesity. Class 3, formerly known as morbidly obese. At this size, Tess is at risk for over 200 different diseases.
Not only is Kiana using the scientifically disproven BMI measure to talk about someone else's health, she's also listing a scary amount of diseases that someone else might potentially have as a result of being overweight. Yikes, Chief. She makes the standard issue arguments, if you're familiar at all with fatphobia. Bodies are not designed to be fat, etc. Kiana does think there's something wrong with fat women feeling beautiful and looking up to Tess because of her confidence in her beauty. Kiana thinks that letting fat people have self-love is dangerous, I guess. Kiana says that Tess has promoted health at every size, which may be true. Kiana thinks that health at every size is a bad movement because it's against internalized and societal fatphobia. It is also about dismantling medical fatphobia and fatphobic discrimination, which really hurts fat people. Kiana claims that this is all a ploy to advance the goals of the movement.
Now, as a quick disclaimer, health at every size has become a huge movement today, and I am not by any means saying that all health at every size practitioners are fat activists and are not even aware that this is a Trojan horse for fat activism. Now, obviously it's my opinion that it's a Trojan horse, but if the shoe fits. So sure, you might say that everything I've listed is a misconception, but I would argue that it's a misconception that these are misconceptions, and it's a ploy to seem more reasonable than it is in order to advance the goals of the movement. And at its core, health at every size's main goal is to push fat activism and not health.
Kiana says the fat acceptance movement has a reputation for being toxic and ostracizing people, and she is laying all of this at the feet of one model and influencer. Most of this video is just Kiana saying that obesity is disgusting and unhealthy, and that Tess Holliday is normalizing that. But none of the videos she cited of people saying that Tess affirmed their self-worth include them saying, yeah, I'm gonna go gain hundreds of pounds. All they said was that she made them feel good about themselves. I also have no interest in debating health concerns with Kiana, because we are not qualified to make decisions or even observations about other people's health. It is just patently obvious that in this video and much of the rest of Kiana's content, she uses health consciousness as a defense against fatphobia.
But I'm not being fatphobic. I'm just saying that this isn't healthy.
Yeah, you can say that, but you don't know that something isn't healthy because you're not that person or their healthcare provider. And why is it so important to Kiana that others be healthy? As a society and a culture, we have collectively decided that healthiness is a virtue, and not like actual health, the appearance of health. There are numerous studies about how people who have pretty privilege experience benefits in life based on this attractiveness. But being healthy, or at least visually appearing to be healthy, is seen as morally good. And now I'm gonna have to differentiate between two different meanings of the word health: actual physical and mental well-being, true health. The visual representation of physical well-being and vigor, illusory health. And there's really nothing wrong with living a very healthy or even health-oriented lifestyle. A lot of people find fulfillment there, and that's good for them. However, it doesn't make you a bad person to be primarily focused on things other than being healthy, and being healthy and being fat are not mutually exclusive. I know a lot of people who are bigger than me who are almost annoyingly focused on exercise and nutrition. We all have that one friend who wants us to try lentil pasta, and it's literally never gonna happen, Brenda. Never. The problem is that as a layperson, you really can't tell that much about somebody's health using visual markers. And even if you are a medical professional, unless someone is meeting you in the context of your job or directly asks for your help, it's not your job to lecture them about their body. Even if you are their doctor, I'm pretty sure tonsillitis has nothing to do with weight. The medical establishment has a pretty bad reputation for attributing all ills to being fat, and society backs them up on that. Most fat people, particularly feminine fat people, experience body policing. The bottom line is that fat people are perceived as immoral by virtue of their fatness. And that means that pretty much anyone is entitled to disrespect their autonomy. Kiana has praised some former fat people in her videos, but notably, most of them are men, and all of them are pro-weight loss. There's also the fact that the idea of what healthy is doesn't extend to a lot of people. Chronically ill people or people with disabilities might never be able to fit the blueprint of what people think health is. Kiana believes in the one-size-fits-all health and wellness mentality. She says that if she can lose weight, anyone can. But, why is she so concerned that people need to be informed about how terrible it is to be fat? My first question was, who is this person and why is she making this content? Because I'd never heard of her before as a YouTube commentary person, and she has almost 300,000 subscribers. After I watched the Tess Holliday video, I decided to watch all of her content because I knew I wanted to talk about this and I wanted to be comprehensive. The conclusion that I have drawn is that she is just viscerally disgusted by fat people.
There's actually survey data on this, that some of the most fatphobic people in society are people who used to be fat.
Yeah. And part of what happens is that folks will start to evangelize about their weight loss.
Exactly.
And I think that's the shape that a lot of this often takes. It's
Right.
like, you don't know how great it can be. It's totally within your control. Why would you, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's also sort of part of this dynamic that makes it really hard.
But the group of former fat people is actually very distinct from current fat people in ways that I don't think non-fat people are trained to understand.
Yes, they're incentivized to distance themselves from their former fat selves, which means distancing themselves from fat people, which means joining in on the gnarliest judgments that thin people have of fat people and becoming one of the most vocal proponents, because that's how you make sure that everybody around you knows you're not a terrible fat person anymore.
So watching this stuff, aside from her clear aversion to fat people, I had some questions. What is her degree in? What makes her qualified to give people information about health?
I'd be curious to hear about your educational and professional background. Do you have any degrees? I have a totally unrelated degree in English. I took a bunch of psych courses in school, but honestly, pretty much everything that I know is just from self-study and my own research.
It turns out she has an English degree, which means she is equally as qualified to talk about health as I am. We have the same diploma. Actually, I might know more about health than her because I don't do a lot of research, but I do have actual CPR and first aid AED training. That's not much, but as far as I know, it's more than she has. Kiana is not a medical professional or a dietitian, but she's given people tips and tricks about how to lose weight. She also has a very young audience who use her videos to suppress their appetites.
People that have eating disorders, Kiana Docherty has some helpful videos.
Kiana Docherty's videos are the best appetite suppressants.
Watching 1,000-Pound Sisters Kiana Docherty video because I almost got a snack.
Watching Obese to Beast, Kiana Docherty, Abby Sharp, Frommy Fit, etc. fuels my eating disorder so fucking much, but I can't stop watching them.
She's teaching young women and girls how to more effectively self-harm, and that's not the kind of educational content I want to see on YouTube. And she's aware that her audience is young.
I'm sure most people watching this do not have back pain, being that my audience is quite young.
So in order to more properly take advantage of her young impressionable audience, once Kiana had amassed a following, she released what she calls her Behavior Change Guide, which is a PDF that she has written and designed in order to sell to her audience. It's about forming good habits, and she says it's made up of her research on what has helped her lose weight and keep it off. In other words, she wrote a self-help novella about a topic she has no qualifications in to sell to teenagers. Kiana also loves to reinforce lies people commonly tell about fatness.
If I can do it, anyone can.
No, they can't. Not everyone can fit your definition of healthy, in this case meaning thin. There are people with disabilities, people on medications, and that is none of your fucking business. Some people are poor and can't afford so-called healthy food, the definition of which, by the way, is different depending on who you ask. And fat does not equal unhealthy. Everyone's body is different, and you really cannot tell anyone's health status by looking at them. The same way, skinny also doesn't mean healthy. I was at one point a very skinny person, and I had an eating disorder. She also just has no nuance about fatness. Her thought process is, 1, you're fat. 2, it's your fault. 3, stop eating so much, you fatty. She is a former fat person, but apparently thinks society doesn't shame fat people enough. Some of her earlier videos talk about the addictive properties of fast food, but she still blames people for being addicted to it.
You don't already know I used to be obese. I lost 100 pounds. And though it wasn't fast food's fault that I was obese, it was my fault, obviously.
Kiana really comes across as a soft conservative, like a Mrs. Midwest for the health nut. She believes in personal responsibility and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Kiana is also weirdly nostalgic for a time when people were more active and like didn't have bad food or something, despite that just never being a thing that happened. There have always been fat people, Kiana. And while on average people are less active now than they have been in the past, there's a good reason for that. Industrialization means that there is enough food in the world for most people, even if it is not distributed in the way it should be. She also claims that society is just generally worse and more disconnected, but like, Kiana, speak for yourself. I know that you're lonely and sad, but not all of us are.
It's somewhat counterintuitive that as society progresses and we enjoy all the benefits that come from that, we seem to be living lives that are more and more disconnected from what is actually healthiest for our body and minds. We have little sense of community. We sit all day. We eat fake food. We're increasingly divorced from our sense of purpose.
This nostalgia for an imagined past that was better than the world we live in now is a conservative talking point. They often claim to miss the days when you could be proud to be an American and families stayed together, when they really just miss being able to lynch black men and when women didn't have control over their own bodies. You know, the good old days. She's also a big Tony Robbins fan, which is not great, given how much of an abusive jerk he appears to be. She has some interesting ideas about reality as well. Like, I kind of get the idea that, like, perception is our reality, but some things just exist. Reality is reality, lady. This is not a simulation. Kiana also has a number of just alarming takes, some of which are ableist to the extreme. She talks a lot about controlling your thoughts, which is something that most people can't do.
It's helpful to realize that, although we don't have control over the stressors that might pop up in our lives, we do control our stress response and how we react to those stressors internally. Worrying about past or potential events, for example, is something that we do have total control over. A lot of people don't realize that indulging in these types of negative thoughts is a choice. And although it can be extremely difficult, especially at first, we are in control and we can choose not to engage with these types of thoughts.
This is a toxic positivity mainstay, right? That letting in negative thoughts is a choice. But most people have dealt with intrusive thoughts at one point or another, and compulsive thinking is a hallmark of mental illness. Like, to give you an example, if I'm not expecting a phone call and the phone rings and it's someone I'm not used to hearing from often, I'll think, oh, somebody's dead. Now, that thought isn't rational, and it's also really negative. But it doesn't matter how many times someone has not been dead when I answer the phone. It really doesn't affect reality. I'm not manifesting death because I have anxiety. She also has this mindset that change doesn't happen for people unless they want to change. But getting out of addiction isn't just about wanting to change. You sometimes just need to change. Many smokers I know just don't want to die, so they have to stop smoking. But they still want to smoke.
You don't quit because you want to. That's bullshit. You do it because you have to.
Now, if anyone here has ever successfully stopped smoking or quit an addiction, you know that what she just said is not true. Wanting to change the specific behavior that is causing the problem is, from what I've seen, a necessary condition of change. Maybe there are some outliers, but from what I have seen in the research, you need to want to change that behavior to be able to change it.
Now, I have what you might call an addictive personality, and while I don't deal with any debilitating addictions, I know that it's not about not wanting the thing anymore. Self-control isn't BS, it is just a muscle you have to flex. And that's not me saying that self-control is infallible, because human beings will fail from time to time, and some people have trouble maintaining any kind of impulse control. But Kiana frequently says that willpower is the worst way to make change, while at the same time insisting that the only way to change permanently is to form habits. But you can't form habits unless you have willpower. So that's nonsense, right? Kiana also has a problem with double standards. She frequently claims that people are dying because of being overweight, but she never talks about eating disorders. Anorexia is the most deadly eating disorder, and her only video about it is when she's just denying that Tess Holliday has it because she's fat. If her concern is about creating healthy eating habits, you'd think she'd bring up habits that a lot of people have that lead to serious health problems. Kiana talks about binge eating because that was what her experience was, but never about any other eating disorders. She seems to be under the impression that all fat people are fat for one reason, and that reason is binge eating. Kiana also contradicts herself a lot. Like, she says that if fat people claim to be happy, they can't express insecurity at all, or even react to a society that shames them. In a video about Virgie Tobar, she claims it's ridiculous that Virgie could feel judged about how she eats. But Kiana herself has expressed shame about eating in public as a fat person. Now, excessive self-criticism, she says, is bad.
It's probably not very effective, and potentially even a little bit dangerous when it comes to weight loss and binge eating. First off, it often leads to the painful emotion of shame.
But her fixating on them and criticizing them on the internet for looky-loos, that's just science. Kiana also says that you should prove any claims that you make.
It's one thing to support a controversial hypothesis, to believe it to be true, and to present it properly. That is totally fine. It's quite another thing to present your opinion as known fact, as if any sane person looking at the research would come to the same conclusion that you are. If you're going to put forth a controversial opinion, you need to prove it. You can't just act like it's self-evident because you're a researcher. And in my opinion, it's outright negligent to present yourself as some scientific authority and then present your opinions as known facts.
I have a totally unrelated degree in English.
She also says that if you are fat and healthy now, you can't claim to be because you might get sick later?
There are plenty of obese people whose metabolic health suggests that they are healthy right now, at this moment in time. If the definition of health we're using here is that health is the absence of disease anyway. But unfortunately, when we look at this group and how they fare long term, it's often found that the metabolically healthy obese at some point become metabolically unhealthy. Obese persons are at increased risk for adverse long-term outcomes, even in the absence of metabolic abnormalities, suggesting that there is no healthy pattern of increased weight. Just because you're not suffering from health problems right now does not mean that you're not at an increased risk than if you were smaller. And I think it's this flawed, metabolically healthy obese idea that has led to this wave of you can't tell a person's health by their appearance more than anything else. But if someone weighs 300 plus pounds like Tess Holliday and has no plans of even acknowledging that it's a problem, then it is fair to say that your weight may indeed disqualify you from being considered healthy. And you can most definitely infer just from looking at them that at their current state, they are at an increased risk of disease. Just because your health markers are not demonstrating in this exact moment that you are not unhealthy does not mean that they will not in the future. Now, does that mean you should say that kind of thing to people? No, of course not. That's really, really rude.
That's really, really rude.
Basically, Kiana Docherty's channel is a pit of despair. I've never really been fat shamed, but I have struggled with disordered eating since I was a kid. Like many young women, I dealt with excessive comments about my body. And I can't imagine how much it sucks to have people feel entitled to give you health advice just because of your appearance. Thank you for struggling through this one with me. It was a hard slog. If you're interested in any of my sources, they'll be linked in the description below. And I highly recommend the Maintenance Phase podcast, hosted by Aubrey Gordon and Michael Hobbs. It is a really intensely researched, wonderful podcast that just has a lot of information about the diet industry and health fads and wellness scams. And the hosts are just marvelous. I wanted to sample their show like 15 times in this video, but I restrained myself. I guess this should just serve as a reminder to treat people with respect. I'm sure that a lot of people who think like Kiana think they're just being well-intentioned and they just want to help, but it's really just a toxic sludge of self-hatred and morbid fascination. And it's probably just to, you know, respect people no matter how they look. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe.